we put a lot of work behind it, and it was a lot of long pre-production and a lot of effort. And I saw the movie as well, and I'm really.
What if I told you that the man who became Bruce Lee quietly vanished from Hollywood right after? Not because he failed, but because he found something deeper. In 1993, Jason Scott Lee was on the brink of superstardom. He had the looks, the moves, and the role of a lifetime. But instead of becoming the next big action hero, he disappeared into the jungle, literally. Off-grid, Hawaii, farming, silence. While the world was watching, he walked away, and no one really asked why. Until now. This isn't just a story about a role, it's about identity, fame, and the price of playing a legend. B. He wasn't quirky enough for comedy, nor coldly precise enough for stoic action heroes. Jason Scott Lee was something else entirely. Introspective, emotionally honest, spiritually grounded. And the truth was, that didn't fit neatly into Hollywood's template for success in the 90s. They didn't know what to do with me, Jason would later reflect. I wasn't Bruce Lee, and I wasn't willing to pretend to be anyone else. Instead of chasing the spotlight, Jason chose integrity. He stepped away from the industry's bright lights and returned to nature, literally. He moved to the big island of Hawaii, surrounded by wild landscapes and ancient rhythms. There, he found peace in farming, surfing, and reconnecting with his roots. He didn't abandon acting, but he refused to compromise his values for the sake of visibility. I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to be free. His choices came at a cost. Offers dried up, Hollywood moved on, and for years, Jason's name faded from the mainstream conversation. But the impact of his work in Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, never did. It quietly persisted. Passed from parent to child, from martial arts dojo to film school. His performance became a cornerstone not only of Asian American representation in cinema, but of what it means to step into someone else's spirit with reverence. Today, Jason Scott Lee remains a cult figure. Not because he chased stardom, but because he didn't. He stayed true to himself, to Bruce, and to the quiet power of a role that reshaped his life. Decades later, the soul he brought to Bruce Lee still speaks louder than all the noise he chose to leave behind. When Rob Cohen first called Jason, the script sat untouched on a shelf. For Jason, the concept of a Bruce Lee biopic felt distant and daunting. He later admitted that the weight of the proposition rooted itself in his chest like a stone. Bruce Lee wasn't just a screen presence. He was Jason's childhood hero, a cultural touchstone, a spiritual figure. The call hit him at an inflection point. Could he rise or crumble? Jason retreated into silence, wrestling with the idea. His honesty shook the Hollywood machine. He told Cohen he wasn't ready. That fear, raw and unfiltered, was the same fear his idol once spoke about. Fear doesn't exist in the absence of courage. He remembered reading in Lee's philosophies. Robinson, humble yet determined, saw something there. Truth. When he finally said yes, it wasn't triumph. It was acceptance. It was a quiet nod to possibility and the beginning of something far more profound than a movie role. The physical transformation was only the surface. Jason's body needed to reflect Bruce Lee's, but his mind and spirit needed to hold his fire. He flew from Los Angeles to California, where Jerry Poddett awaited. Poddett, a stoic, intense instructor in Bruce's lineage, didn't care about Jason's fame. He cared about truth. Training began with silence. Standing before a mirror, Jason observed himself. Height, posture, gaze. Poddett watched. One morning, he walked over and said 3 words. Limit equals self. It seemed an equation, but it was a challenge. Jason's limits weren't physical. They were permanent. So they trained until the limits blurred. By day's end, Jason's knuckles were seared, his heart hammered. He sweated like Bruce's training montages. But Poteet didn't stop. He drilled Jeet Kune Do forms until they stuck. not as choreography, but as instinct. Experiments followed, moving without thinking, reacting without scripts, carrying fear like a shoulder weight. The lines between acting and being began to blur. Behind those days were nights of reflection. Potit taught that Jeet Kune Do wasn't technique, it was honesty. Jason meditated, wrote, and wrestled with self, his flaws, his doubts. What does it cost to be Bruce? What does it cost to be me? Weeks turned into months. Jason was broken physically, infected joints, bruised ribs, raw muscles, and mentally. He lost friends to the process. He slept little. Every mirror looked like judgment. But something else happened. He reached consistency. He showed up when everything hurt. He struck a heavy bag until his hands bled and his spirit steadied. One night, after a brutal sparring with Potit, Jason sat at his hotel window, overlooking the dark parking lot. The emptiness made him cry, softly at first, then searing. Within the loneliness, he saw something. A man who looked like Bruce Lee, but inside he felt the weight of 2 lives. A career hinging on the truth of this role, and the price to preserve his integrity. That night, he wrote one line in his journal. "If I break here, I break everything." The words were simple. The meaning was immense. Still fragile, Jason stepped onto the Universal lot. Instead of getting lost, he walked into a scene he never expected. Linda Lee Cadwell, hunched over old boxes packed with Bruce's history. In that moment, Jason realized his challenge wasn't to replicate Bruce. It was to inhabit his legacy with respect. He watched Linda's solemn gestures, how she unfolded a faded yellow karate shirt, how she smelled the fabric, how she smiled with grief and pride. They spoke with few words, but Linda's softly spoken caution forged something in Jason, an obligation inseparable from passion. This wasn't performance, it was pilgrimage. The meeting with Brandon came soon after. Over dinner at Mr. Chow's, Jason was on edge. Professional politeness masked his insecurity. Brandon leaned forward and delivered advice that rippled through Jason's chest. "Don't try to be Bruce Lee. Be you." The simplicity stunned him. At once, he realized the truth Bruce Lee had spent decades teaching. You cannot mirror a man, only honor his essence. The permission to be flawed, human here, was transformational. Filming began. As camera wheels spun, Jason tried to embody Bruce, but anxiety followed him like a shadow. He kept a journal. Daily entries marked pressure 9 out of 10. He described rehearsals as bipolar, moments of transcendence followed by flashes of chaos. On one afternoon after a missed fight cue, he stumbled and felt unmoored. The crew's collective inhale echoed his uncertainty. Homesickness crept in. He missed Hawaii. The early light, warm air, open water, and the mindfulness woven into every sunrise. He texted his family, "Feels like I'm drowning." Days later, script supervisor came with news. They'd lost a scene. Jason needed to reshoot, but his eyes were glazed and his hands jittered. He learned later, she told staff, he's not well. He nodded, yet he showed up, not to make a movie, to prove to himself he could hold the weight. During a fight sequence under lights blazing like desert sun, the other actor's blow caught him. Jason staggered, his jaw throbbed, but he got up. He limped. He went to his trailer to breathe. He came back to finish the day. Halfway through production, Potit flew in. He watched Jason's unsteady technique, his tension, his exhaustion. He gathered his hands and said, "Calm." The message was simple, but his tone carried lineage. Something ancient, passed down. A session followed where Jason spars alone, lights low, Potit silent in the corner. Jason struck, drifted, pivoted. His moves were sharper, his breath softer. Potit pressed his palm to Jason's chest. "Here," he said. "Power there is silence. That is the secret." Jason felt something crack in him. Fear, ego, confusion. Then resolved. He nodded. He got up. He moved again. The night before the final fight shoot, Rob Cohen called Jason to his trailer. They talked deeply. Cohen was quiet. Jason asked, "What do you want?" Cohen closed his eyes. He thought. He said, "I want truth." They looked at each other, two men chasing what lies in the gap between myth and flesh. A truce formed. Jason said, "I'll give you my truth." The next day, on set, the camera opened, and Jason was there. Not as Bruce Lee the legend, but Bruce Lee the person. Breathing, aching, furious, loving, and maybe more terrifyingly, being himself standing in someone else's shoes. The film debuted in theaters. Jason sat in the back row. He watched, barely recognized himself, but he understood. The vulnerability, not the veneer, penetrated hearts. Box office climbed. $63 million globally, nearly twice what the studio expected. Critics praised him. Roger Ebert called the performance electrifying. Reviews echoed across publications, from The Hollywood Reporter to Variety, hailed his poetic intensity and brave emotional honesty. But the real triumph emerged in emails, letters, and quiet posts surfacing years later. Parents telling their kids the film inspired them to train. Asian Americans saying they saw themselves on the big screen for the first time. Martial arts schools attributing increased enrollment to a young man's slow burn faithfulness. Jason read messages years after release. "You gave Bruce a soul. I'm who I am because I saw you." These words, stitched in anonymity, became his reward. Many expected Jason to ride the success wave. High-budget action flicks, franchises, red carpet glamour. Offers flooded his agent's inbox. A high-octane spy thriller, a space opera, a sleek new martial arts vehicle. He turned them all down. Why? He felt Bruce Lee's shadow trailing, not as pressure, but as conscience. He didn't want to imitate fame. He wanted to live faithfulness. He wanted dignity without deniability. Instead, Jason left Hollywood's orbit. He moved back to Hawaii, to the Big Island, stepping out of branded campaigns and glossy premieres and into the rhythms of wind, sand, and soil. Each day he woke before dawn. He walked fields. He planted and harvested. He chopped wood. He surfed. He taught his children how to see, not just the world, but themselves. Those practicing presence and mindfulness became his dojo. His life multiplied. Heir to tradition and father of toddlers. He grew not richer, but steadier. He became, to himself, enough. In reframing Bruce Lee's story, Jason also reframed what it means to be Bruce Lee. He carried the torch in silence, through land stewardship, family rights, quiet affirmation. Jeet Kune Do wasn't just in studios. It was in everyday pacing, disciplined parenting, active stillness. He made choices consistent with Bruce's philosophies. Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless. He chose freedom over fame, truth over appearances. 90 minutes of film became years of philosophy. 30 years on, Jason still hears from people shaped by his role. Notes from Thailand, Brazil, Canada, Malaysia. One girl writing, "I never knew martial arts could heal." Another, "My dad and I bonded over your Bruce Lee film." Little messages stacking up, micro legacies. He reflects in interviews. "I didn't become Bruce Lee, but I found my own purpose." He speaks of sacrifice, not as tragedy, but as promise. He honors that break. "I broke down before I broke through." He doesn't appear on talk shows or fuel social media storms. Instead, he mentors young actors quietly, shares life lessons through Hawaiian cultural camps, and supports martial arts students who struggle with doubt. He's present, sturdy, silent, true. His journey reverberates because it asks an ancient question. What does it cost to be more than a legend? To carry greatness without carrying pride? To channel inspiration without being consumed by it? Jason's answer is simple, yet radical. Live. He chose ordinary over ornate. Courage carried out in sun-worn fields, bedtime prayers, tight embraces, and clearing rain-curved leaves from pathways. He chose internal mastery. He chose consistency. In that choice, he honored both Bruce Lee's teaching and his own life. Jason Scott. Lee didn't just portray Bruce Lee, he suggested a way forward. Using myth not to inflate ourselves, but to clarify. Bear the weight, return to earth, teach the next generation. When mindful teenagers stand in front of screens, their lungs catch hearing his return to nature and humility. When cultural forums speak of representation, his film stands as a bridge. Grief and resilience, vulnerability and vigor. Jason Scott Lee's journey after portraying Bruce Lee in Dragon. The Bruce Lee story is a powerful example of quiet strength, self-awareness, and choosing authenticity over fame. While his performance earned critical acclaim and resonated deeply with audiences, particularly those from underrepresented communities, he deliberately stepped away from the Hollywood spotlight. Rather than chase stardom, he retreated to Hawaii, where he focused on family, self-growth, and community work. He taught local youth not just martial arts but life lessons about fear, discipline, and identity. Though offers continued to come his way, Jason turned down roles that didn't align with his values, preferring projects that prioritized meaning over money. Over time, his impact became less about celebrity and more about legacy, how he quietly inspired others to embrace their true selves, just as playing Bruce Lee had helped him discover his own. His story isn't one of missed opportunity, but of conscious choice. A man who was offered cinematic legend status and instead chose a grounded life of service, reflection, and integrity. Jason Scott Lee's life after Dragon. The Bruce Lee story unfolds like a quiet rebellion against the traditional expectations of Hollywood fame. After his breakout performance as Bruce Lee in 1993, many assumed he would ascend the ranks of action movie superstardom. He had the looks, the talent, the physical presence, and the growing fan base to support such a trajectory. Yet, in the years that followed, he took a path few expected. Instead of aggressively pursuing roles or staying tethered to the Hollywood machine, Jason slowly stepped back, moving to the big island of Hawaii and choosing a life rooted in nature, family, and introspection. For him, playing Bruce Lee wasn't a launching pad to more fame. It was a mirror, a transformative experience that made him reconsider what kind of man he wanted to be, and what kind of life was truly worth living. Lee often spoke about how training in Jeet Kune Do for the film helped reshape his understanding of fear, identity, and balance. Bruce Lee's philosophy of self-expression and being like water deeply influenced him, not just in physical movement, but in spirit. Rather than conform to industry norms or chase roles that didn't speak to his heart, Jason decided to apply that fluidity to his life. He started a permaculture farm, taught martial arts to local youth, and began living off the land. This wasn't retreat, it was reinvention. He showed that an artist's worth doesn't have to be defined by visibility or accolades, but by alignment with personal values. His life became his art, and in doing so, he forged a quieter but no less meaningful legacy. Though he occasionally returned to film, appearing in roles such as Mowgli in The Jungle Book, 1994, or in more recent work like Disney's Mulan, 2020, he remained selective. He turned down many projects that could have brought him mainstream fame, because they either misrepresented Asian culture, stereotyped characters, or simply didn't reflect who he had become. His restraint sent a message, especially to younger Asian American actors trying to navigate their own careers. Success isn't always about visibility, but about integrity. He became a quiet role model, not because he chased the spotlight, but because he walked away from it with dignity. Jason Scott Lee's story continues to resonate because it challenges the common narrative that artists must stay relevant to matter. He proves that relevance can come through presence, authenticity, and purpose. In the entertainment world, where fame often pulls people away from their roots, Jason did the opposite. He went home. And in doing so, he offered a different kind of inspiration. That fulfillment comes not from how many people recognize your name, but from how well you know your own. He leaves an inheritance, not gold, not stardom, but story. A story of fear, wrestling, breakthrough, and intentional living. In those stories, every fight, fall, and sunrise count. Now in his mid-50s, Jason lives like water. Steady, alive, reflective. He's written essays, helped apprentice filmmakers, announced his support for cultural preservation in Hawaii. He doesn't call himself retired, he says he's shifted. He's no longer chasing roles, he's living roles. Perhaps someday he might return to acting, but on his terms and in his time. He speaks of curiosity, not ambition. He shares readiness, not demand. And when he does, when sunset meets camera lights again, he'll come rooted in deeper soil. Rooted in history, grief, growth, and quiet power. Because that's what Bruce taught him first. The evolution of self is the highest art. From that frightened call with Rob Cohen to the fields of Hawaii, from tears behind closed doors to blessing given across tables with Linda and Brandon, from journal entries questioning legacy to letters from strangers changed. This is the story of a man who became a legend by choosing not to be one. Jason Scott Lee didn't lose the spotlight. He simply chose not to need it. In a world chasing visibility, he found meaning in solitude, discipline, and roots. His journey from Hollywood's rising star to humble guardian of the land is more than a career arc. It's a quiet revolution. One that redefines success, not as staying famous, but as staying true. If this story moved you, let us know below. What does real legacy look like to you? Don't forget to like and subscribe.